April 4th, 2018. Daytona Beach, Florida. A Piper Arrow owned by Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University is in the traffic pattern, a commercial checkride. The pilot applicant is about to get his certificate, then the wing comes off. Not the engine, not the fuel, the wing. The aircraft had 7,691 hours on the airframe. It had passed every annual inspection. The fatigue crack that killed both men on board was in an area that cannot be visually inspected without disassembly. Piper had known about the manufacturing process that creates this exact failure mode since 1961. This is not a story about that one airplane. It is about yours. At 8:47 in the morning on April 4th, 2018, a Piper Arrow owned by Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University broke apart in the climb out from Daytona Beach International Airport. The left wing separated cleanly at the root. Both the student pilot and the examiner died instantly, just minutes from a successful check ride. The airplane, tail number N106ER, had logged 7,691 hours, about average for a flight school workhorse, and had passed its annual inspection less than a month before. No discrepancies were noted in the logs. Weather was clear. There was no sign of corrosion, no history of hard landings, and nothing unusual in the maintenance records. The NTSB final report describes 3 fatigue cracks in the lower cap of the left wing main spar, each originating at or near the lower corner bolt hole. The cracks had been growing for months, hidden deep inside the spar, in a spot no mechanic can see without taking the wing apart. In the last 90 days, the largest crack widened from 0.02 of an inch to 0.07 of an inch, enough to guarantee catastrophic failure under normal flight loads. The Arrow had survived more than 33,000 cycles of takeoff and landing, many of them in the demanding pattern work of a training environment. The inspection that could have found the crack was not required, and the area in question is not accessible during routine annual inspections. The NTSB Structures Laboratory called out the fatal flaw, a fatigue mechanism driven by high cycle use, concentrated at a bolt hole in the lower spar cap, and invisible to standard visual checks. The aircraft failed not because of a missed inspection, but because the inspection regime itself was blind to the real risk. The cost was 2 lives and a wing in the grass, with a maintenance log that gave no warning at all. 1987, north of Fort Worth, a Piper Cherokee lost its left wing in flight. The NTSB docket, FTU 87FA088, details a fatigue crack that started at the lower corner of the main spar cap, hidden from any mechanic's view. Metallurgical analysis pointed to a cold pull defect from manufacturing, a flaw baked in since the day the spar was formed. The FAA responded with airworthiness directive number 880307, requiring ultrasonic inspections every 2 years for Cherokees with more than 3,000 hours. But the tool could not reliably catch cracks smaller than 30,000ths of an inch. Within 18 months, the FAA rescinded the rule, airworthiness directive number 891203, citing detection limits and industry complaints about downtime. 6 years later, the same story played out again. In May 1993, a PA-28 crashed near New York City. The NTSB docket NYC 93FA140 described 3 fatigue cracks radiating from the lower corner bolt hole of the left wing spar cap. This time, investigators found a high cycle fatigue pattern aggravated by an incorrectly countersunk rivet hole. The FAA issued a broader directive, Airworthiness Directive number 930512, calling for eddy current inspections every 100 hours and mandatory reporting of findings. Still, the inspection regime was patchwork and compliance varied across the fleet. Both accidents shared an identical fracture morphology. Cracks started at the blind spot around the lower spar cap bolt holes, growing quietly until the wing let go. The brief window of mandatory inspections closed almost as quickly as it opened. For nearly 2 decades after, the inspection gap left thousands of Cherokees flying with a flaw that standard annuals would never reveal. Every owner wants to know, how widespread is this risk? The FAA records show that since the first inspection mandate in 2021, just over 2,800 PA-28 and PA-32 aircraft have undergone the required eddy current scan of the lower spar cap. These are not just numbers on a form. Each one represents an aircraft that could carry a family, a student, or a flight instructor. Out of those 2,800 inspections, more than 100 reports flagged a possible crack. In 6 cases, the findings were confirmed: real fatigue cracks in the lower spar cap, the same hidden flaw that brought down 1106ER and 2 others before it. Every confirmed crack means a grounded aircraft and a major repair bill. It also means a disaster averted. The numbers only tell part of the story. The Piper Cherokee family is one of the most popular low-wing singles ever built. Tens of thousands of these airplanes are still flying, from flight schools to private strips, many with spars made decades ago under the original cold bend process. Most have never had a spar cap replaced. The inspection data shows that while the crack rate is low, about 0.2%, the consequences are absolute. A single missed crack can end a career or a life. This is not a theoretical risk or a rare outlier. The FAA submission database, built from owner and mechanic reports, confirms that the flaw is present in the fleet. The scale is national, not local. For anyone buying or flying a Cherokee, the odds may seem small, but the exposure is real, and the only way to manage it is to know the numbers before you fly. Cold bending the Piper Cherokee's wing spar starts as a practical shortcut. Take a bar of 2024 T3 aluminum, press it upward, and the metal yields just enough to hold a permanent angle. But this bend does more than shape the wing. It leaves behind a field of residual tension, invisible but locked deep within the metal, right where the main spar cap meets the lower bolt hole. Finite element analysis, the tool engineers use to map stress at the molecular level, reveals a sharp spike at the outer edge of the bend. The numbers are striking. Tensile residual stress can hit 45,000 pounds per square inch at the surface, then drop off within a couple of inches. These are not estimates. They are the output from stress maps run for the 2020 airworthiness directive. The highest readings always cluster at the same place, the lower corner bolt hole drilled after bending. The problem compounds when that bolt hole is drilled through cold-worked metal. The hole acts as a stress concentrator, focusing every load the wing ever sees. Under flight loads, stress at the hole edge can be 2.6 times higher than in the rest of the spar cap. Stack that on top of the residual tension from bending and the effective stress intensity, the number that predicts when a crack will start, jumps 40% compared to a straight or machined part. This makes the lower spar cap bolt hole an almost certain crack starter. Fatigue cracks do not appear at random, they follow the physics. Every takeoff, landing, and gust adds another cycle, and the stress field at the hole edge means a crack is nearly guaranteed to start there. Metallurgists have mapped failed spars and found a dense network of dislocation cells, evidence of plastic strain from the bend. Hardness at the apex climbs from 42 to 58 on the Brunel scale. Grain boundaries twist by more than 15%, all classic signs of cold work. No amount of careful drilling can erase the fact. The cold bend makes the failure site inevitable. Piper's original fatigue test report from 1961 claimed the Cherokee wing spar could survive more than 300,000 load cycles. That number still circulates in hangar talk and sales brochures, but it comes from a laboratory test that did not match real-world conditions. The test article was a straight spar, stress relieved after forming, and never drilled for bolt holes. It never saw the cold bend that every production Cherokee spar gets. It never faced the relentless pounding of a flight school circuit, dozens of cycles a day, every day, year after year. In the field, the difference is stark. Witness test specimens pulled from retired trainers rarely make it past 8,500 to 9,500 cycles before a crack appears at the lower spar cap bolt hole. Machined dihedral test pieces, introduced decades later, last more than twice as long. The cold bend process, once defended as a cost-saving shortcut, embeds a permanent tensile field at the exact spot where the bolt hole will be drilled. That's the weak link. In service, especially under the high-frequency cycles of training operations, cracks start there and grow unseen. Piper's engineering department stood by the original process for years, pointing to the 300,000 cycle claim and noting that most Cherokees never see that many cycles. But the numbers from the fleet tell a different story. Flight schools rack up cycles fast. Some Arrows and Archers hit 30,000 cycles in less than a decade. The fatigue clock doesn't care about calendar time. It cares about cycles, and every takeoff and landing counts. The fix arrived quietly in 2023. Piper changed the production line. New spars are now machined to the final dihedral angle, not bent. The machined dihedral spar eliminates the residual stress field, drops the stress concentration at the bolt hole, and removes the life limit driver that has haunted the cold bent fleet. For owners, that means no more ticking clock, just a single 5,000-hour inspection interval and no prescribed service life. The old cold bent spar still flies, but its future is now defined by inspection thresholds, reinforcement options, and for those who want out of the cycle count game, a machined replacement. The Cherokee can be fixed. The risk comes from not knowing which spar you have, how many cycles it has seen, and what the next inspection will cost. Federal airworthiness directives are the backbone of what every Cherokee owner is legally required to do, and what happens if they do not. The story starts with AD 2026-16, finalized in January 2021. This was the first directive to tie inspection mandates to the concept of factored service hours, FSH. It is not just about what the logbook says for total time. The FAA formula adds a multiplier for every 100-hour inspection, each one a marker of high-cycle flight school use. For example, an aircraft with 7,200 hours and 10 100-hour inspections racks up 12,200 FSH. That is well over the old inspection threshold, even though the logbook might look safe on paper. AD 2020-2616 requires an eddy current scan of the lower main spar cap bolt holes for any PA-28 or PA-32 with FSH over 12,000. If a crack is found, the wing comes off the airplane, no exceptions. If nothing turns up, the aircraft remains airworthy, but the clock keeps ticking. The directive also mandates corrosion inspection in the same area, recognizing that fatigue and corrosion can work together to undermine the spar. In September 2024, the FAA issued two new directives, AD 24-24-02 and AD 24-24-03. The first expands inspection requirements to every PA-28 and PA-32, regardless of age or hours. Now both left and right wing lower spar caps must be scanned by ultrasonic and eddy current methods every 40 hours of flight. The second directive enforces explicit life limits. Unmodified cold bent spars are grounded at 12,000 FSH, while those reinforced per Piper service. Bulletin 1372 can fly up to 25,000 FSH. The new machined dihedral spar introduced in 2023 carries no prescribed life limit beyond a 5,000-hour inspection interval. Compliance is not optional. Once an aircraft crosses the FSH line, it is legally grounded until the required reinforcement or replacement is done. These rules define the burden and the boundaries for every owner and buyer in the Cherokee community. Sticker shock hits fast when the inspection deadline arrives. The first bill is almost always the scan itself, about $1,000 per wing at most reputable shops. For a Cherokee owner, that is just the entry fee. If the eddy current test flags a crack, the options narrow to two: reinforcement or full spar replacement. Parts alone for the reinforcement kit run $8,000 to $10,000 per wing. Add labor, and the invoice climbs to $12,000 or $15,000, sometimes more if the shop is busy, or the wing has corrosion that needs to be addressed before work can start. Full spar replacement, especially with the new machined part, often lands in $14,000 to $17,000 per wing before labor. When you factor in downtime, weeks in the shop, lost flying, and the ripple through a flight school's schedule, the real cost for a high-cycle trainer can hit $25,000 or more. Owners talk about the moment they see the quote as a gut punch. One longtime Cherokee pilot described it this way: "I thought I'd budgeted for everything. Then the inspection found a crack, and suddenly I was looking at a repair bill that matched what I paid for the airplane." The financial hit does not stop at the repair shop. Listings for high-hour, unmodified Cherokees have dropped by $10,000 to $20,000 overnight as buyers factor in the likelihood of a looming spar job. Sellers are forced to negotiate, and buyers who do not ask the right questions risk inheriting a five-figure liability. The market now treats spar compliance like a ticking clock. If the math on factored service hours does not add up, the price takes a dive. For every owner, the numbers are not just paperwork. They are the difference between a safe, valuable airplane and a project that could drain a savings account. First step before you even set foot on the ramp: get the full logbook, not just a summary. You want every annual, every 100-hour inspection, every compliance entry. Count the 100-hour inspections. Do not skip this. Each one means the plane was likely hammered in a training environment, and each adds to the real fatigue total. Take the total time in service, add 500 hours for every 100-hour inspection, and you have your factored service hours, FSH. If that number is over 12,000, you are looking at an immediate eddy current inspection requirement under Airworthiness Directive A D 2020-26-16, and you need proof it has been done. No paperwork, no sale. Next, demand to see the eddy current inspection report for the lower main spar cap bolt holes. Not a sticker, not a verbal assurance. An actual report with the technician's sign-off. If the seller cannot produce it, you are on the hook for the scan before you close. Remember, the inspection is not just a box to check. It is the only way to know if there is a crack hiding in the spar, and if one turns up, you are into serious repair territory. If the factored service hours number is close to the limit, or if the aircraft has a history with a flight school, insist on a fresh eddy current inspection before you move forward. And always check for compliance with the latest airworthiness directives. September 2024 brought new requirements that cover both wings every 40 hours. A missing entry or a skipped scan is not just a paperwork gap. It is a reason to walk away, or at the very least, to renegotiate the deal. The numbers in the logbook are your first and best leverage. Use them. Every Cherokee buyer eventually faces a choice: reinforce, replace, or walk away. When the factored service hours cross 12,000 hours and the spar is still the original cold bent type, the clock is not just ticking. It has run out. The only way to keep flying is to ACT. Piper's Service Bulletin 1372 lays out the reinforcement path: a doubler plate, new hardware, and a corrosion-inhibiting seal coat. Installed by a certified shop, this upgrade brings the spar's life limit up to 25,000 hours. The parts run between $8,000 and $10,000 per wing, with the total installed cost often landing in the $12,000 to $15,000 range. Full spar replacement, especially with the new machined dihedral part, can push the bill to $17,000 or more per wing before labor, sometimes as high as $30,000 for a school airplane with heavy cycles and downtime. Not every seller is ready to eat that cost. If the aircraft needs reinforcement or a new spar, the buyer has leverage. $12,000 to $30,000 off the asking price is standard. No one should close a deal without proof of Service Bulletin 1372 compliance or a documented machined spar. If the numbers do not add up, the best move is to keep your cash and your peace of mind. As one Sky Ranch mechanic puts it, if you cannot see a reinforcement plate or a fresh part number in the log, you are buying a project, not a plane. Do not let the seller's story cost you a wing. Right now, every Cherokee on the ramp carries a calculation: hours flown, cycles logged, and metal fatigue you can't see. The risk isn't theoretical. It's in the logbooks and under the floor panels. This airplane is as honest as its owner is informed. The flaw isn't fatal unless you ignore the math. Before you fly, know your numbers. Your signature is the real airworthiness inspection.